The Draft State Planning Policy 3.7 Bushfire and Planning for Bushfire Guidelines has been released for public comment until the 17th of July 2023. This presentation provides an outline of the main changes and how you can have your say. The draft policy and guidelines are being released as a draft public consultation not intended for decision making. This means that the draft policy is being released to gather feedback to help inform the post-consultation process when elements of the policy will be refined. The draft policy and guidelines incorporate a contemporary best practice approach to planning in bushfire-prone areas. The aim is to address implementation issues associated with the previous policy framework. Both draft documents are a result of the state government's review of the current bushfire framework. Significant changes have been made to SPP 3.7 and the guidelines, reflecting changes in the draft map of bushfire-prone areas that allow for a more pragmatic policy response by planning decision makers. We encourage you to read the draft SPP 3.7 and the guidelines and provide your feedback to the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage. The main changes to SPP 3.7 and the guidelines are outlined in this video. Overall, they provide a stronger emphasis on considering bushfires early in the planning stages. A set of frequently asked questions has been prepared and is available on the DPLH website. The draft map of bushfire-prone areas designates bushfire-prone areas as Area 1 or Area 2. Area 1 will apply to the urban built-up areas of the Perth Swan Coastal Plain and Mandurah, and some areas covered by the Bunbury Region Scheme. Area 2 covers the rest of the state. Draft SPP 3.7 and the guidelines provide a more nuanced response to the level of risk between the built-up urban areas within Area 1 and the rest of the state. The Department of Fire and Emergency Services will lead a separate public consultation process on the draft map in the second half of 2023. For more information about the draft map, please go to the DFES website. The objectives of draft SPP 3.7 have been reviewed to ensure they complement each other and provide a direct line of sight to the measures and outcomes. The revised objectives: 1. Removed reference to avoidance of risk. 2. Better articulate the need to ensure future development is resilient to bushfire. And 3. Manage bushfire risk to people, property and infrastructure. Policy outcomes have been introduced to assist in the implementation of the policy objectives. Policy outcomes are achieved through compliance with the bushfire protection criteria using the acceptable solutions or through an outcomes-based approach. SPP 3.7 introduces an assessment of the broader landscape surrounding a planning proposal to demonstrate compliance with Element 1 location. This assessment is in response to the increasing severity of landscape-scale bushfires experienced across the state. It recognises the bushfire protection criteria may not be sufficient to manage the impacts of a bushfire in some locations, and that intensification of land use or development should be avoided. The broader landscape is the area beyond the planning proposal or development application, extending for a distance up to 2 kilometres beyond the 150-metre bushfire hazard level or bushfire attack level contour assessment area. This new methodology enables assessment of the surrounding location, including bushfire hazards associated with vegetation type, extent and slope, the broader road network, proximity to urban areas, and suitable destinations for evacuation. The assessment will determine the potential intensity of a bushfire and whether the location is suitable for intensified land use or development. When finalised, the draft SPP 3.7 and the guidelines will replace the previous performance principle-based pathway with an outcomes-based approach where acceptable solutions cannot be achieved. The performance principle-based pathway has limits, lacking the flexibility to consider applications that cannot comply with the acceptable solutions due to complex site and/or environmental constraints. An accredited bushfire planning practitioner will need to provide an expert opinion that SPP 3.7 outcomes can be demonstrated in an outcomes-based approach. This outcomes-based approach pathway also aims to better equip decision makers with the skills to make informed decisions where the acceptable solutions cannot be achieved. To provide more succinct guidance and an easier layout for users, the guidelines have been divided into sections based on the planning stage or type of development. The sections provide guidance for higher order strategic planning proposals, subdivisions, and development application types. Each section, which includes bushfire protection criteria specific to the application type, outlines specific design and environment considerations, information required to support the strategic planning proposal, subdivision, or development application, a range of bushfire assessment tools applicable to the application type, when a bushfire management plan and bushfire emergency plan is required. A new section within the draft guidelines assists with applications for commercial, industrial and community purpose buildings. Applications include development of or additions to a habitable building for commercial, industrial or community uses, and development of or additions to a habitable building for a vulnerable commercial, industrial or community purpose that is not a tourism land use. Examples of vulnerable commercial or community land uses include aged or assisted care nursing homes, education centres, education establishments, schools, childcare centres, hospitals and rehabilitation centres, corrective institutions like prisons, large community purpose centres or large places of worship. Due to the building design or use or the number of occupants, these types of facilities are likely to present evacuation challenges in the event of a bushfire. The terms minor development and unavoidable development have been removed from draft SPP 3.7 and guidelines as they are confusing and were not being applied consistently. This change will address implementation issues associated with the previous policy framework. Applications that would have been considered as a minor or unavoidable development can now be assessed under the relevant planning section of the guidelines, which provide information on when it is appropriate to site development within BAL 40 or BAL flame zone. These are the main changes to draft SPP 3.7 and the guidelines. The FAQ document on the DPLH website provides more detail on all the changes. Comments on SPP 3.7 and the guidelines should be submitted to the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage, DPLH, before Monday the 17th of July 2023. For other questions relating to changes in SPP 3.7 or the guidelines, please contact the Land Use Planning Policy team by email bushfirereview@dplh.wa.gov.au.